Maya Johnson's hands trembled as the metal cuffs clicked around her wrists. At 32, she had spent most of her life standing up for the weak, defending people who had no voice in a world that barely noticed them. Her calm, calculating mind had always been her shield, and her courage, her weapon. But now, standing in the center of a courtroom filled with cold, judging eyes, she faced a choice that could change everything. Should she remain silent and let the system crush another innocent life, or risk everything, including her freedom, to reveal the truth that no one wanted to hear? Would anyone believe her if she spoke out? Could one person really make a difference against the tides of corruption? And most importantly, what if speaking out brought danger she couldn't survive? The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the courtroom, falling in thin stripes across the polished wood floors. Dust motes danced in the golden beams, almost like tiny witnesses to the drama about to unfold. Maya's sharp brown eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail: the jury, tense and whispering, the prosecutor, smirking with confident arrogance, the spectators, their eyes fixed on her as if they were watching a live spectacle rather than a matter of life and death. Even the air seemed heavier than usual, thick with anticipation, as though it were holding its breath in expectation of what was about to happen. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Behind her, the officer's hands remained firm on the cuffs, but there was a hesitation in their grip that gave her a fleeting sense of hope. Her mind raced back to the events that had led her here: months of investigation, nights spent poring over evidence, endless meetings with whistleblowers who feared for their lives. And now, in a moment of cold irony, the very institution she had trusted was trying to silence her. The prosecutor, a tall man with a voice like gravel, began to speak, detailing charges that were both fabricated and inflated. "Maya Johnson, you stand accused of tampering with evidence, of conspiring to mislead the court, and of obstruction of justice." His words were sharp, slicing through the tense air. A few heads nodded in approval, convinced of her guilt, while others shifted uneasily, sensing the injustice beneath the surface. But Maya wasn't listening to the accusations. Her eyes were fixed on one thing: the stack of confidential files on the judge's bench. Hidden beneath them were the true documents that proved her claims, documents that could expose the corruption running through the heart of the city's legal system. No one else seemed to notice their importance, and that gave her a small but critical advantage. As the officer stepped forward to escort her to a holding area, she noticed a young court clerk fidgeting nervously behind the bench. The clerk's eyes met hers for a fleeting moment, and in that silent exchange, Maya understood something crucial: help was closer than she thought. A plan began forming in her mind, one bold enough to shock everyone in the courtroom, yet precise enough to avoid immediate danger if executed perfectly. The audience murmured as she was led past the jury, her gaze sweeping over familiar faces in the crowd. Some were friends who had come to support her, others were strangers drawn by the rumor of scandal. And among them, lurking in plain sight, were those who had orchestrated this trap. Their smug smiles told her they believed they had won, that she would remain silent and powerless. But Maya had always thrived in moments like this. Her mind flashed back to her childhood, growing up in a neighborhood where injustice was the daily norm. She remembered watching her mother stand up to bullies at school, even when it meant receiving threats. She remembered her father quietly defending tenants against greedy landlords, always walking the line between danger and righteousness. Courage wasn't a choice in her family, it was survival, and it was legacy. And today, she would honor that legacy. The officer nudged her toward the exit. "Time's up, Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. Maya felt the power shift subtly, like a tide beginning to turn. She didn't respond, only nodded minutely, pretending compliance while every nerve in her body prepared for action. Then, in a calculated movement that drew every eye, she twisted her wrist and dropped a small envelope from the pocket of her coat onto the floor. It slid across the polished tiles toward the judge's bench. The envelope contained a USB drive, proof of high-level misconduct, proof that the prosecutor's case was built on lies, and evidence of the hidden network of corruption that threatened to destroy lives. The room froze as the envelope stopped at the judge's feet. For a split second, nobody moved. And then, chaos erupted. The prosecutor lunged forward, shouting, "Stop! That's tampered evidence!" But Maya stepped back, raising her voice for the first time. "Check it. Look at it. You'll see the truth," she commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins. Everything you're accusing me of is the lie. The real criminals are in this room, hiding behind their suits and smiles." Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to loud chatter. The jury shifted uneasily, some glancing at the envelope, others at the judge, whose eyes narrowed as he reached for the USB drive. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, but her hands were steady. She had started a chain reaction, and there was no turning back now. And then something unexpected happened. The young court clerk stepped forward, his hand shaking slightly as he held out a document to the judge. "Your Honor, this just arrived. It's a witness statement that corroborates Ms. Johnson's claims." The prosecutor's face turned pale, and for the first time, he seemed uncertain. Maya's mind raced, every second counted. If the judge looked at the evidence and accepted it, the trial could collapse. If he ignored it, she would face jail time, maybe worse. She had forced the moment, but the outcome was still uncertain. As she was escorted back toward the holding area, Maya's gaze met the prosecutor's once more. No words passed between them, but the tension was electric. One wrong move from either side, and the fragile balance of power would shatter. Outside the courtroom doors, the murmurs of the crowd spilled into the hallway. Reporters had gathered, sensing a major story. Cameras flashed as Maya was led away, but she walked with her head held high, knowing that the seeds of truth were already planted. The courtroom, once a place of judgment and control, had become a battlefield where justice and corruption clashed. And she had made the first move. Her thoughts flickered to the questions that had haunted her since this journey began. Would the truth be enough to topple the powerful men who had tried to silence her? Could she trust anyone in a room where everyone had something to hide? And most importantly, was she prepared for the storm that was about to break, now that the first domino had fallen? The doors closed behind her, muffling the chaos inside, but the tension followed her like a shadow. She knew that in a few hours, or even minutes, the courtroom would erupt in a confrontation unlike anything anyone expected. And she would have to be ready. Ready to speak, ready to fight, and ready to transform fear into action. The hallway outside the courtroom was thick with tension. Reporters jostled for position, their microphones and cameras eager to capture every moment of the unfolding drama. Security officers tried to maintain control, but their faces betrayed uncertainty. Something had shifted, an invisible force had entered the room, and everyone felt it. Maya Johnson walked with quiet confidence, her steps measured, her mind racing, her heart pounding with the thrill of the challenge she had ignited. Once inside the holding area, she was not alone. Other detainees eyed her curiously, sensing a change in the air, as if she carried a spark no one could extinguish. She leaned back against the cold wall, letting her eyes scan the small, fluorescent-lit room. She thought about the envelope, now lying on the judge's bench, and the young clerk who had stepped forward. Courage had appeared in unexpected places, and Maya realized she had set more in motion than she initially believed. Back in the courtroom, the judge held the USB drive, turning it over in his hands as if weighing its gravity against the rules he had spent years enforcing. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. The prosecutor, who had moments ago been confident and commanding, now looked unsure, glancing from the judge to the jury, from the evidence to Maya's absent figure. He tried to regain control, clearing his throat and raising a finger. "Your Honor, this is inadmissible. We cannot." But the judge raised his hand, silencing him. His eyes were fixed on the screen as he inserted the USB drive into a laptop. Every detail of corruption, every hidden transaction, every falsified record appeared before the jury, before the court, before everyone. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Faces paled. Whispers turned into exclamations. And somewhere deep in that moment, the air of authority that had once dominated the room began to crumble. Maya felt a rush of satisfaction. Her mind raced, not with triumph, but with strategy. This was just the beginning. She knew the prosecutor would try to counterattack, the powerful people behind him would move quickly, and she had to stay one step ahead. Her thoughts flicked to her team, loyal friends who had risked everything for truth, for justice, and she silently vowed to keep them safe while dismantling the system that threatened them all. Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Jurors leaned forward, captivated by the unfolding truth. Witnesses who had once feared speaking now exchanged glances of hope. Spectators whispered to one another, trying to make sense of the flood of revelations. Even the judge, typically stern and unflinching, could not hide a flicker of admiration. Maya had done what no one else dared. She had exposed the hidden heart of corruption in front of everyone, and she had done it without violence, without threats, only with courage and cunning. The prosecutor, realizing the tide had turned, snapped his fingers at a young assistant. "Find the backup files. Stop this nonsense. Control the situation." But his orders fell on deaf ears. The courtroom was alive, pulsing with energy, and no one listened to him anymore. Maya's bold action had shifted the balance, and the people, ordinary citizens, jurors, even some spectators, felt a new kind of power. They could see the truth. They could feel it. And in that moment, justice seemed possible, even if fleeting. Outside, reporters began broadcasting live, their voices shaking with excitement. A dramatic turn in the Johnson case. Evidence has just surfaced showing alleged corruption at the highest levels. Cameras focused on the courthouse as officers and lawyers scurried to maintain order, but the world outside had already witnessed a fracture in authority that could not be easily mended. Inside the holding area, Maya felt a surge of determination. She had expected resistance, but the speed at which the court began to unravel surprised her. The young clerk had acted as a silent ally, and now it seemed like more allies were emerging from the shadows. People who had previously been too afraid to speak were now emboldened, stirred by Maya's courage and the undeniable evidence she had risked her freedom to deliver. Her thoughts returned to the prosecutor, whose confident demeanor had dissolved into panic. Maya imagined his mind racing, trying to salvage his career, his reputation, his freedom. She realized that the very arrogance that had led him to underestimate her would now be his undoing. Yet she could not afford to underestimate him either. He was clever, ruthless, and dangerous, the type who could orchestrate revenge when least expected. Maya had to stay vigilant, and she had to act fast. The judge cleared his throat, signaling for silence. He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of every juror, every spectator, and finally, he spoke. "We are dealing with evidence that may change the course of this trial entirely. I must review these documents carefully before any further decisions are made." His voice carried authority, but also an unusual hint of uncertainty. He knew the courtroom had shifted, and he knew that in this moment, Maya Johnson had become more than a defendant, she had become a force. Maya's mind flicked to the next steps. She had sparked the initial wave of chaos, but she needed more than just revelation. She needed a strategy to ensure that justice was not merely an idea, but a reality. As she sat in the holding area, her mind moving faster than her body could, she began to piece together her plan. She would need witnesses, documents, and undeniable proof that left no room for the lies to survive. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The courthouse became a storm of whispers, secretive glances, and hurried footfalls. Maya imagined herself at the center, orchestrating the chaos like a conductor guiding a symphony. Every piece had to fall perfectly into place. One misstep, and the momentum could collapse. Then, in the corner of her vision, she noticed a small figure approaching, an old friend, someone she had once trusted to guard sensitive information. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. Maya realized that she was no longer alone in this fight. She had allies, hidden and ready to act when the time was right. Their presence brought a rush of hope, mixed with the weight of responsibility. Together, they could turn the tide, but the stakes had never been higher. As night fell outside the courthouse, the building itself seemed to pulse with tension. Inside, shadows stretched across the walls, dancing with the flickering lights. Maya leaned back, letting herself absorb the magnitude of what had begun. This was not just a battle for one case. This was a battle for truth, for justice, and for every person who had ever been silenced by fear or power. Her thoughts returned to the questions that had haunted her since stepping into the courtroom. Could one person really change the system? Could courage outweigh corruption? And, most urgently, what price would she have to pay if the powerful decided she had gone too far? Then, the cell door clanged. A guard appeared, holding a folded note, his expression unreadable. Maya took it, her heart tightening as she unfolded the paper. Written in bold, precise letters was a single message. They are planning something. Tonight. Be ready. Maya's pulse quickened. The storm she had unleashed was only the beginning. Danger was closer than she imagined, and the next move would determine whether justice triumphed or whether the forces aligned against her would crush everything she had fought for. She folded the note, her mind sharpening into focus. There was no turning back. Every moment counted. Every choice mattered. And as the shadows deepened outside the courthouse windows, Maya knew that the battle for truth was about to enter its most dangerous phase yet. Maya sat on the edge of the hard bench, the folded note burning in her palm. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting jittery shadows that seemed to move with her thoughts. She knew that the message was no idle warning. Someone powerful, someone who had everything to lose, was planning a move tonight. And if she didn't act quickly, the consequences could be catastrophic. She glanced around the holding area. The quiet murmurs of other detainees barely registered. All her focus was on the plan forming in her mind. She had to reach the evidence in the courtroom before the night ended. She had to make sure it could not be destroyed, manipulated, or hidden. And she had to do it without exposing herself to the trap she suspected was waiting outside these walls. The young clerk, the one who had first dared to step forward, appeared at the doorway, glancing nervously at the officers. He leaned in and whispered, "Maya, I can get you to the records room. There's a back route no one notices. But you'll have to move fast. They're already tightening security inside the courthouse." Maya's heart leapt. The risk was immense, but so was the opportunity. "Show me," she whispered back, her voice low and steady. Every second counted. The clerk led her through a series of narrow corridors and stairwells, areas seldom used by the public. The air was thick and stale, a stark contrast to the sunlight that had streamed through the courtroom windows hours earlier. Maya felt her pulse in her throat, a rhythmic reminder of the danger she faced. One wrong step, and everything could collapse. Finally, they arrived at a heavy metal door marked "Records Room, Authorized Personnel Only." The clerk produced a small keycard, swiping it quickly and holding the door open for her. Inside, the room smelled of old paper and ink, filing cabinets stacked floor to ceiling. She could feel the weight of years of secrets pressing down on her. Every document, every file, could hold the truth or conceal more lies. She moved quickly, scanning labels and folders. Then she saw it, a thin, unmarked folder that had been carefully placed on top of a cabinet, almost as if someone wanted it to be found. Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she pulled it down, and inside was proof more damning than anything she had seen before: financial records, internal memos, even audio recordings exposing a network of bribes, cover-ups, and threats that extended to the highest levels of the city's legal and political systems. "This is it," she breathed, her eyes scanning the papers. The weight of responsibility pressed down harder now than the metal cuffs ever could. If this evidence reached the judge, the trial could shift completely. But if it was intercepted, manipulated, or destroyed, everything she had risked would be for nothing. A sudden noise behind her made her freeze. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Someone else had entered the corridor. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, and whispered to the clerk, "Go. Now. Lead them away from me." The clerk hesitated, his young face pale, then nodded and darted down the corridor. Maya held her breath as the footsteps grew closer. A shadow fell across the doorway, and a voice, calm, dangerous, familiar, cut through the silence. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Johnson." The prosecutor. He had followed her. His presence was a physical weight, pressing in from the doorway, daring her to make a move. His eyes gleamed with a mixture of rage and fear. "I should have finished this before it got out of control," he said, stepping closer, a hint of menace in every word. Maya's mind raced. She could fight him, but one wrong move would end her plan. She could run, but the corridor led nowhere safe. And then she noticed the small vent at the back of the room, partially hidden behind stacked boxes. It was narrow, but it might be just wide enough to slip through, carrying the folder with her. With the prosecutor advancing, she acted. She moved quickly, lifting the folder above her head, and squeezed into the vent, feeling the cold metal scrape against her arms. Every breath was shallow, every movement calculated. The prosecutor's shouts followed her into the vent, but the narrow space muffled the sound. She crawled forward, muscles straining, heart pounding in her ears, until finally, she emerged into an unused service corridor on the other side of the courthouse. She paused, gasping for breath, and looked at the folder in her hands. Her plan was working, but the danger was far from over. Security was tightening, cameras were scanning, and the prosecutor would not stop until he had regained control. Every second counted, and the next step would require all her courage, all her cunning, and a touch of luck. Maya moved quickly through the service corridors, noting doors and exits she had memorized during her previous reconnaissance. She needed to reach the judge's chambers, direct access, unmediated by officers or clerks. The corridor led to a stairwell, and she descended slowly, pausing to listen. Footsteps echoed above her, a reminder that the courtroom's chaos had not ended, it had merely spread like a wildfire, unpredictable and uncontrollable. Finally, she arrived at the entrance to the judge's chambers. The door was locked, as expected, but she noticed the small intercom system on the wall. With a deep breath, she pressed the button and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "This is Maya Johnson. I have evidence that will change the outcome of tonight's trial. It cannot wait." There was silence. Then a voice, cautious but familiar, responded, "Leave it at the door. I'll verify it before anyone else sees it." Maya placed the folder down carefully, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She backed away, her mind racing with contingencies. If the judge accepted the evidence, the prosecutor's control would collapse entirely. But if the folder was intercepted, destroyed, or ignored, everything she had risked could vanish in an instant. She moved back toward the stairwell, planning her next move, when she heard a sudden commotion behind her. A group of officers, alerted by the prosecutor's frantic calls, had discovered her path. They blocked the corridor, leaving her with no clear escape. Maya froze, calculating. One option was to fight, but there were too many, and she could not risk being captured before the evidence reached safety. Another was to negotiate, but the officers were unlikely to listen without orders. And the final option, the boldest, riskiest choice, was to create a diversion. Her eyes landed on a small fire alarm box on the wall. If she triggered it, the blaring alarm would force evacuation, create chaos, and distract the officers long enough for her to slip away. She hesitated, weighing the risk. But then she remembered why she had come this far, the innocent lives that depended on her courage, the truth that demanded to be revealed. With a swift motion, she pulled the lever. The alarm screamed through the courthouse, a piercing, chaotic sound that shattered the tense calm. Officers shouted, trying to regain control, while the prosecutor's face twisted in fury. People began evacuating, and in the chaos, Maya slipped past the distracted guards, her pulse racing, her mind focused on the folder, the judge, and the storm she had unleashed. With a swift motion, she pulled the lever. The alarm screamed through the courthouse, a piercing, chaotic sound that shattered the tense calm. Officers shouted, trying to regain control, while the prosecutor's face twisted in fury. People began evacuating, and in the chaos, Maya slipped past the distracted guards, her pulse racing, her mind focused on the folder, the judge, and the storm she had unleashed. She paused for a moment in the stairwell, catching her breath. The night was only beginning, the battle had just escalated, and the courthouse, once a place of order and authority, had become a theater of uncertainty. And at the center of it all stood Maya Johnson, determined, fearless, and ready to change everything. But even as she moved, a chilling thought entered her mind: someone had anticipated her actions. Someone had planned for this chaos. And if that was true, what came next might be far more dangerous than anything she had faced so far. The fire alarm's shrill wail faded into a distant echo, but the chaos it had unleashed still pulsed through the courthouse. People rushed through the hallways, shouting, pushing, and tripping over one another in panic. Maya moved swiftly, her breathing controlled, her steps precise. Every movement was calculated, but her mind was alive with every possible outcome, every potential trap. She reached the stairwell and pressed herself against the wall, peering into the hallway below. Security officers were scrambling, trying to regroup, their movements frantic, disorganized. Among them, she caught sight of the prosecutor, shouting orders, face red with fury. He had lost the upper hand, but she knew he wouldn't give up. Not tonight. Not ever. Maya's attention was pulled to the folder tucked under her arm. The evidence within was explosive: financial corruption, falsified records, secret deals, and threats that could bring down careers, reputations, and even powerful political figures. Each page she had touched felt like fire in her hands, the weight of responsibility more real than any physical burden. If she lost it now, all her courage, every step she had taken, would have been for nothing. She reached a service door that led toward the rear entrance of the courthouse. The door was heavy and locked, but she had prepared for this. With a swift swipe of a hidden key card she had procured days earlier, the lock clicked open. She pushed it gently, slipping into the alley outside. The cool night air hit her face, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat inside. But safety was an illusion. A dark van was parked nearby, engine running, its windows blackened. Two men stepped out, their faces partially obscured by hoods. Maya instinctively ducked behind a dumpster, heart pounding. Whoever had anticipated her moves was watching her, waiting for the moment to strike. She scanned the surroundings, looking for a way to move unnoticed, but the van's position blocked her path to the street. From the shadows, a voice called out, calm, controlled, and chilling, "Ms. Johnson, we know you're there. Come out, and this can end quietly." Maya's pulse quickened, but she refused to panic. She had faced threats before, and she had learned that fear was a weapon the powerful use to control the weak. Taking a deep breath, she stepped from the shadows, folder pressed tightly to her chest. "I'm not leaving empty-handed," she said, her voice steady. "And I won't let you silence the truth." The men hesitated, as if surprised by her audacity. One of them took a step forward, raising a hand to gesture, but Maya was ready. In one fluid motion, she pulled a small smoke device from her pocket, a precaution she had prepared for emergencies like this, and threw it toward the van. A cloud of thick smoke enveloped the area, forcing the men to cough and step back. Seizing the opportunity, Maya sprinted toward a narrow alley leading to the street behind the courthouse. Her mind raced with strategy. She had planned for immediate obstacles, but this was bigger than anticipated. Whoever was behind this had resources, surveillance, and men ready to intercept her. And yet, she had to keep moving. Stopping was not an option. Every second she delayed, the risk grew, and the evidence, the folder, was too valuable to lose. As she ran, she thought of the young clerk, the ally she had inside the courthouse, and the judge who now held the USB drive. Their fates were intertwined with hers. If she succeeded, the truth would reach them and justice would begin. If she failed, the consequences would ripple far beyond herself. Suddenly, the van's engine roared to life, tires screeching as it chased her down the alley. Maya ducked behind a stack of trash bins, pressing herself into the cold brick wall. She knew she had to create another distraction, something that would buy her time and space to escape. Her eyes landed on a stack of crates near the alley's end. Without hesitation, she grabbed a loose crate and pushed it into the path of the van. It toppled, rolling with a loud crash and forcing the driver to swerve violently. The van skidded, tires screeching, narrowly missing the crates, and Maya seized the opportunity to sprint past. She reached the street, blending into a group of pedestrians who had gathered outside the courthouse in response to the alarm. Cameras flashed, people shouted, and the chaos worked in her favor. She moved quickly, carefully, eyes scanning for another safe route to disappear into the city night. Maya's mind churned with next steps. The folder needed to reach someone reliable, someone who could act fast and ensure the evidence's safety. She thought of Detective Harris, a man she had worked with before, known for his integrity and bravery. He had access, influence, and most importantly, a commitment to justice that matched her own. Pulling out her phone, she sent a brief, encrypted message: "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street. Bring backup. Evidence secure, but pursuit is active. Hurry." Almost immediately, she received a reply: "On my way. Stay safe." Maya allowed herself a brief moment of relief. She was not alone, and reinforcements were coming. But she also knew that her enemies were relentless. The prosecutor and those backing him would not stop until they had silenced her or stolen the folder. Every step forward was a gamble, every shadow a potential threat. She ducked into a narrow side street, slipping into darkness, her pace steady but urgent. The city at night seemed alien, streets quiet except for the occasional hum of a distant car or a pedestrian's hurried footsteps. She kept low, using shadows as cover, until she reached the old warehouse. The building loomed like a silent sentinel, abandoned but perfect for hiding from prying eyes. Inside, Detective Harris waited, accompanied by two trusted officers. Their faces registered surprise and concern, but also determination. "You made it," Harris said, his voice steady but urgent. "We've secured the perimeter. No one comes in without our say." Maya handed over the folder carefully, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline. "This is everything," she said. "If we act fast, we can expose them before they realize what's happening." Harris nodded. "We'll need to move quickly. The prosecutor won't sit idle. He'll try to contain this any way he can." Maya took a deep breath, scanning the dim interior of the warehouse. This was the calm before the next storm. The courtroom chaos had escalated into a citywide chess game, and she was a key player. One wrong move could destroy everything. But Maya had never backed down from impossible odds. She was ready for whatever came next, ready to fight, ready to expose the truth, and ready to change the course of the battle she had ignited. And even as she planned her next move, a cold thought lingered in her mind: someone knew more than she realized. Someone had anticipated her escape. And if that was true, the real danger had only just begun. The old warehouse smelled of dust and rust, shadows stretching across the walls as the dim light flickered from a single overhead bulb. Maya Johnson sat at a battered metal table, the folder she had risked her life to retrieve now spread out before her, each document a detonator of truth. Detective Harris moved beside her, meticulously checking each file and audio recording, ensuring nothing had been tampered with. "You did well getting this out," Harris said quietly, his eyes scanning the papers. "But they know you've been here. Someone's tracking every move." Maya's jaw tightened. She had expected pursuit, but the speed and precision of her enemy's response suggested a level of planning she hadn't fully anticipated. "They underestimated me once," she said, her voice low but firm. "They won't make that mistake again. Not if I stay ahead of them." Hours passed as they catalogued the evidence. The more Maya read, the more she realized the depth of corruption. Bribes, cover-ups, falsified testimonies, threats to innocent witnesses, all connected to the prosecutor, powerful politicians, and even members of the judiciary. It was more than just a legal battle now, it was a war against a system built to protect the guilty. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the warehouse, a soft click, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Maya freeze. She signaled Harris to be quiet. Their eyes met, understanding passing silently, they were not alone. A shadow appeared at the far end of the building. A man stepped into the light, tall and imposing, his expression unreadable. It was the prosecutor. "Miss Johnson," he said, calm but cold, "you're playing a dangerous game. Hand over the folder, and perhaps this can end quietly." Maya rose slowly, keeping her distance. "End quietly," she repeated, incredulous. "You've threatened innocent people, lied under oath, and tried to destroy anyone who opposed you. There is nothing quiet about the truth, it will come out, whether you like it or not." Harris moved slightly to her side, positioning himself strategically. Maya noticed the subtle shift in the prosecutor's stance, the way his hand hovered near his coat, where she suspected a weapon might be concealed. She had to act quickly, hesitation could cost them everything. "I won't let you intimidate me," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "And I won't let you erase the evidence that proves who you really are. If you think fear will stop me, you're wrong." The prosecutor's eyes narrowed, his smile tight. "Bravery is commendable," he said, "but it's also naive. You're alone out here. You can't protect yourself forever." Maya's mind raced. The confrontation was inevitable, but she knew brute force alone would not win this battle. She needed leverage. Her eyes flicked to the folder, and then to a small, hidden recording device she had placed near the entrance when she first arrived. If she triggered it, their conversation and any threats would be captured, instantly turning the tables. As the prosecutor advanced, confident and menacing, Maya pressed a button on the device. A soft beep confirmed it was recording. She spoke clearly, loud enough for it to register, every word a declaration of truth. "You're not going to silence me. Every move you make, every threat you utter, is being recorded. The world will hear it, and justice will follow." The prosecutor faltered, the first crack in his facade. He lunged forward, attempting to grab the folder, but Harris intercepted, blocking him with precise, controlled strength. The man stumbled back, caught off guard by their coordination. Maya seized the moment. "We're leaving," she said firmly. She grabbed the folder and backed toward a side exit, Harris following close behind. The night air outside was cool, but the tension was thick, like a storm waiting to break. But even as they moved, a chilling realization struck her. Someone had anticipated this escape too. From the shadows, another figure emerged, this one more subtle, more silent. A sniper? An assassin? Maya couldn't tell, but the glint of metal under the moonlight confirmed that danger was immediate, deadly, and unseen. She ducked instinctively, rolling behind a low concrete barrier, her heart racing. Harris drew his weapon, scanning for the threat, but the figure remained elusive. Maya's mind raced. How had they been predicted so thoroughly? How much did their enemies know about their movements? The sound of a faint, mechanical click made her look up. Another trap. This one was designed to scare, to immobilize. And yet, Maya's resolve only strengthened. She had faced fear before. She had faced danger before. And she had always chosen action over hesitation. "We need a plan," she whispered to Harris, crouched beside her. "They're playing chess, and we've been forced into a corner. But corners can be turned into traps of our own." Harris nodded, eyes sharp. "We need allies, and fast. People who can control the media, secure the evidence, and protect the judge. If we don't act now, they'll try to erase everything tonight." Maya's mind flickered to the young clerk, the hidden witnesses in the courtroom, and the ordinary people who had shown courage in moments of fear. They were more than pawns, they were potential partners in exposing the truth. And in that moment, a plan began to crystallize. They would split. Harris would create a diversion, drawing the attention of the unseen threat, while Maya would move to secure the judge and the original USB drive. Risky, yes. But necessary. And as Maya looked at the folder, her heart swelled with determination. This battle was far from over. The storm of deception, betrayal, and danger was closing in from all sides. But she had faced impossible odds before, and she would face them again. Every move from now on had to be precise, every decision critical. And somewhere deep inside, she knew, the next hours would determine not just her fate, but the fate of countless others. As the shadows pressed closer and the night deepened, Maya clenched her fists. She was ready. She would fight. She would expose the truth. And she would not back down, not for fear, not for power, not for anyone. The night was alive with tension, every shadow seeming to whisper threats. Maya Johnson pressed herself against the cool brick wall of the alley, the folder and USB drive clutched tightly against her chest. The distant sirens of the city mingled with the pounding of her heart, creating a rhythm that mirrored the chaos she had unleashed. She had navigated traps, threats, and betrayals, but the ultimate test still lay ahead, exposing the truth to the world while ensuring her own survival. Detective Harris moved beside her, calm and precise, every step measured. "We're close," he whispered. "The judge's chambers are secured. We just need to get inside and make sure the evidence is in safe hands before anyone interferes." Maya nodded. Her mind flashed to the prosecutor, lurking in the shadows somewhere, determined to reclaim control. But she had learned something crucial over the past hours: fear could be turned into strength, and precision could outmaneuver brute force. Every move from now on had to be perfect. They approached the courthouse from a less obvious angle, using the chaos of the night, the alarms, the evacuating crowds, the flashing lights, to shield their approach. The main doors were heavily guarded, but the side entrance Harris had scouted days ago provided the perfect path. It was narrow, nearly invisible, and led directly to the judge's office. Inside, the judge waited, an expression of cautious anticipation on his face. The USB drive and folder were placed carefully on his desk. Maya took a deep breath, letting her voice carry clearly in the quiet room. "Your Honor," she said, "everything you see here exposes corruption at the highest levels. Lies, cover-ups, and threats meant to destroy the innocent, all of it is documented. It's time to act." The judge leaned forward, reviewing the documents, his eyes widening as he absorbed the gravity of what he held. This changes everything," he said, his voice measured but unmistakably shocked. "We cannot let this be ignored. Action must be taken immediately." From the shadows, the prosecutor stepped forward, attempting to regain dominance. "This isn't over," he said sharply. "You can't just decide what is right. You'll ruin careers, lives." Maya didn't flinch. "I'm not deciding what's right," she said firmly. "The evidence speaks for itself. The truth will decide." Her eyes locked on his, unwavering. "And this time, no threats, no lies, no intimidation will stop it." Suddenly, cameras flashed outside the office window. The young clerk, braving the chaos of the courthouse one last time, had alerted the media. Live feeds broadcast the unfolding truth to the city and the world. Every corrupt action, every hidden deal, every falsified testimony was now visible to the public. The courthouse itself became a theater of revelation. The prosecutor faltered, realizing the tide had irrevocably turned. Panic flickered across his face as he saw reporters approaching, officers questioning their orders, and ordinary citizens witnessing his crimes. Maya's daring, her courage, and her relentless pursuit of truth had stripped him of power in the most public and undeniable way. Harris stepped forward, reinforcing her presence. "The evidence is secure, and the judge will ensure it reaches the proper authorities," he said, voice steady. "Your options are gone." Maya felt a strange calm wash over her. The hours of danger, the threats, the adrenaline, they had all led to this moment. She had stood alone in the face of overwhelming odds, but she had not been powerless. The system, corrupt though it was, could still be redirected, and she had ignited that change. Outside, the city buzzed. Reporters broadcast every revelation, ordinary people shared the story online, and the prosecutor's network of deceit began unraveling in real time. Justice, it seemed, was no longer a distant ideal, it was active, alive, and unstoppable. Maya turned to the judge, whose eyes held gratitude and awe. "Thank you for seeing the truth," she said softly. "Without your courage to act, this could have been lost forever." The judge nodded, his voice firm. "Courage is contagious, Ms. Johnson. You've reminded us all what it means to stand for justice." Hours later, as dawn began to break over the city, Maya walked out of the courthouse. The air was crisp, the streets alive with the energy of people awakened by truth. Her body was tired, her mind exhausted, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. She had risked everything, faced down unimaginable danger, and emerged not just victorious, but changed, stronger, more determined, and more certain that one person's courage could indeed alter the course of many lives. As she looked back at the courthouse, now quiet and resolute in the aftermath of chaos, she reflected on the journey. Every threat had been real, every risk tangible, but the choice had always been clear. Stand for justice, or stand aside and let lies prevail. Maya smiled faintly, knowing she had made the right choice. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was the decision to act in spite of it. The city stirred around her, a new day beginning, the evidence safe, the corrupt exposed, and the innocent given hope. Maya Johnson had not just survived, she had ignited a revolution of truth. And as she walked into the rising sunlight, she knew that no matter what challenges awaited, she would face them with the same unshakable determination. The world had seen what courage could achieve. And now, it would never be the same again. Moral: true courage is not in avoiding danger, it is in standing for truth and justice, even when the odds are impossible. One person's bravery can illuminate darkness and inspire a wave of change.